Alia's breath caught in her throat as she watched Zane's fingers intertwine with Sophia's. Across the library table, their chemistry undeniable even in the harsh fluorescent lighting. 3 years she'd been gone, studying abroad, in London, rebuilding herself from the wreckage of her family's scandal. And now she was back at Riverside University only to find her childhood best friend had transformed into everything she'd once dreamed he could be. The autumn leaves crunched beneath her boots as she'd walked across campus that morning, her transfer paperwork clutched in trembling hands. The familiar red brick buildings hadn't changed, but everything else felt different. She was different. Gone was the awkward 17-year-old who'd fled to London after her father's embezzlement. Scandal broke, taking with it her family's reputation and her place in this small college town. In her place stood a woman who'd learned to survive in foreign cities, who'd discovered her passion for international relations, who'd grown into her own skin. But seeing Zane again made her feel like that uncertain girl, all over again. He looked up from his textbook, and their eyes met across the crowded library. For a moment, time suspended itself between them. His dark hair was longer now, falling across his forehead in waves that made her fingers itch to brush them away. His shoulders had broadened, filling out the cable-knit sweater that hugged his frame. But it was his eyes, those warm brown eyes that had always seen straight through her, that remained exactly the same. Alia, his voice carried across the space between them, filled with disbelief and something else she couldn't quite name. Sophia turned to follow his gaze, her perfectly manicured eyebrows rising as she took in Alia's appearance. The blonde was everything Alia wasn't: confident, established, belonging. Her claim on Zane was written in the casual way she rested her hand on his arm, in the matching university hoodies they wore. "I should go," Alia whispered to herself, but her feet remained rooted to the spot as Zane stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "Alia, wait." He was moving toward her now, leaving Sophia behind with a confused expression. "I can't believe you're here. When did you get back?" The familiar warmth of his voice wrapped around her like a favorite sweater, and for a moment she forgot about the years between them, forgot about the girl watching from the table, forgot about all the reasons she'd stayed away. Yesterday, she managed, clutching her books tighter against her chest. "I'm transferring back for my senior year." His smile was the same lopsided grin that had made her heart flutter when they were kids, building forts in his backyard and sharing secrets under the old oak tree. "That's incredible. We've all missed you." The correction was subtle, but she caught it. Of course he had a life here, relationships, commitments she knew nothing about. She'd been foolish to think she could simply slip back into their old dynamic. "Zane?" Sophia's voice carried a note of impatience, and Alia watched as he glanced back at his girlfriend, conflict playing across his features. "I should let you get back to your studies," Alia said quickly, taking a step backward. "It was good seeing you." But as she turned to leave, his hand caught her wrist, sending electricity shooting up her arm. "Don't disappear again," he said quietly, his thumb brushing across her pulse point. "Promise me." The touch was innocent enough, but the intensity in his eyes made her breath hitch. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and pulled away before she could do something foolish like lean into his touch. Walking away from him felt like tearing herself in half, but she forced one foot in front of the other until she reached the safety of the corridor. Only then did she allow herself to look back, to see him still standing there, watching her leave while Sophia tugged impatiently at his sleeve. Coming home had been a mistake. She could see that now, could feel it in the way her carefully constructed walls were already beginning to crumble at the first sight of him. But it was too late to run again. This time, she'd have to find a way to survive loving Zayn Malik while watching him love someone else. The question was whether her heart could handle the breaking all over again. 2 weeks into the semester, Professor Martinez announced the International Relations project that would change everything. "You'll be working in pairs," she declared, scanning the lecture hall with sharp eyes. "I've already made the assignments based on complementary skills and research interests." Alia's heart hammered against her ribs as the professor read through the list. When she heard Alia Chaudhry and Zayn Malik, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. She felt his gaze burning into the side of her face, but kept her eyes fixed on her notebook. After class, he approached her with that same easy confidence that had always made her knees weak. "Looks like we're partners," he said, falling into step beside her as they walked across the quad. "Looks like it," she replied, proud of how steady her voice sounded despite the chaos in her chest. "Want to grab coffee? We should probably discuss our project approach." The suggestion was innocent enough, but the way he said it, like he was asking her on a date, made her stomach flutter. They found a quiet corner booth at the campus cafe, their laptops open between them like a buffer. But as they discussed their research on European Union expansion, the years began to melt away. He still had the same habit of running his fingers through his hair when he was thinking, still tilted his head in that particular way when he was really listening. "Remember when we used to debate politics in your mom's kitchen?" he asked suddenly, his eyes soft with memory. "You mean when you used to let me win because you had a crush on me?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, and heat flooded her cheeks. His laugh was warm and genuine. "Let you win. You demolished my arguments. Every time. I was just trying not to look like a complete idiot in front of the smartest girl I knew." Their eyes met across the table, and the air between them shifted, charging with unspoken possibilities. He reached out as if to touch her hand, then seemed to remember himself and pulled back. "How's Sophia?" Alia asked, breaking the spell, hating herself for bringing up his girlfriend, but needing the reminder of reality. Something flickered across his face, guilt, maybe, or frustration. "She's good, busy with her psychology major." He paused, studying his coffee cup. "She doesn't really understand the whole academic thing. Politics bore her." It was a small confession, but it felt significant. Alia had always loved their intellectual sparring, the way they could talk for hours about everything from local politics to global affairs. It had been one of the things she'd missed most during her years in London. "The project's due in 6 weeks, she said, steering them back to safer ground. "We should probably meet regularly to stay on track. Every Tuesday and Thursday," he suggested. "The library has those private study rooms on the 3rd floor. She nodded, even though the thought of spending hours alone with him in a small room felt dangerous. "That works." As they gathered their things to leave, he touched her arm gently. "Alia, I'm really glad you're back. I know things ended badly before you left, with your family and everything, but I've always regretted that we didn't get to say goodbye properly." The memory of that awful last week rushed back, the media circus, the federal agents at her door, the way friends had suddenly become strangers. She'd been too ashamed to face anyone, especially him. "I wasn't in a good place to say goodbye to anyone," she admitted. "I know. But I want you to know that I never believed what they were saying about your family. I knew your dad wouldn't have done those things willingly." Her throat tightened with unexpected emotion. In all the months of testimony and legal battles, of watching her father's reputation crumble and her mother retreat into herself, no one had ever said they believed in his innocence. Even she had begun to doubt. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what that means to me." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "I missed you," he said quietly, "more than I should have." The confession hung between them like a promise and a threat. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed with a text. The spell broke as he glanced at the screen. "Sophia's wondering where I am," he said, something like apology in his voice. Alia nodded, wrapping her scarf tighter around her neck. "You should go." But as they walked in opposite directions across the campus, she could feel him looking back at her, just as she was fighting the urge to turn around and run back to him. This project was going to be either the best or worst thing that had happened to her since coming home. She was beginning to suspect it might be both. The rain started during their 4th study session, fat drops spattering against the library windows as Alia and Zain hunched over their research. The private study room felt smaller than usual, charged with an energy that had been building between them for weeks. "I think we're overthinking the economic impact section," Zain said, but his voice was distracted. He'd been stealing glances at her all afternoon, and she'd caught him staring at her lips more than once when she was reading aloud. "Maybe," she agreed, closing her laptop. "We've been at this for 3 hours. My brain is fried." The storm had intensified while they worked, transforming the world outside into a watercolor painting of grays and blues. Thunder rolled across the campus, and the lights flickered ominously. "Looks like we're stuck for a while," Zane observed, moving to stand by the window. The rain had plastered his dark hair to his forehead, and Alia realized he must have gotten caught in the downpour. On his way to meet her, "You're soaked," she said, standing up and moving toward him without thinking. "You'll catch your death." Her hand reached out to brush the water from his hair, and the moment her fingers made contact with his skin, everything changed. He went very still, his breath catching as she gently combed the wet strands away from his face. "Alia," he said quietly, and there was a warning in his voice, but also a plea. She should have stepped back, should have returned to her seat and pretended nothing had happened. Instead, she found herself studying the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes had darkened as he looked down at her. "We can't," he whispered, but his hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "I know," she breathed, but she didn't move away. The space between them disappeared slowly, inevitably, like gravity pulling them together. His forehead rested against hers, and she could feel his breath warm against her lips. Her heart was beating so loud she was sure he could hear it. "God, I've missed you," he murmured, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was everything she'd dreamed it would be, and nothing like she'd imagined. Soft at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might disappear. But when she responded, her arms winding around his neck, it deepened into something desperate and hungry. Years of separation, of wondering what if, poured into that kiss. His hands tangled in her hair, and she pressed closer, wanting to memorize every detail, the way he tasted like coffee and mint, the low sound he made when she kissed him back, the feeling of finally being exactly where she belonged. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back in waves. Zane stepped back as if he'd been burned, running shaking hands through his hair. "Fuck," he breathed. "Fuck, I shouldn't have." Zane, she started, but he was already moving away from her, putting the table between them like a barrier. "I have a girlfriend," he said, the words hitting her like a physical blow. "I have a girlfriend, and I just got. What kind of person does that make me?" The pain in his voice was almost worse than her own hurt. She wanted to comfort him, to tell him it was okay, but nothing about this was okay. They just shattered something, and she wasn't sure it could be put back together. "It was just a kiss," she said quietly, even though they both knew it was so much more than that. He laughed bitterly. "Was it? Because it felt like..." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "This can't happen again, Alia. It can't." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw you and Zane in the library. Interesting. Maybe Sophia should know what her boyfriend does when she's not around." Blood drained from her face as she read the message. Zane noticed her expression immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, moving toward her despite his earlier resolve. She showed him the text, watching as his face went pale. "Who's M?" she asked. "Maya," he said grimly. "Sophia's roommate. She's never liked me. Always thought Sophia could do better. She was watching us." The thought made Alia feel sick. Their private moment, the kiss that had felt so right despite everything, had been witnessed by someone who would use it as a weapon. "I have to tell Sophia," Zane said, more to himself than to her. "I have to tell her before Maya does." The words hit Alia like a slap. Of course he would choose Sophia. Of course he would try to salvage that relationship while treating what had happened between them like a mistake to be confessed and forgiven. "Right," she said, gathering her things with shaking hands. "You should do that." "Alia." "Wait," but she was already at the door, unwilling to hear whatever he might say next. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but she barely noticed as it soaked through her jacket on the walk back to her apartment. She'd been foolish to think that one kiss could change everything. Foolish to believe that 3 years apart hadn't mattered. Maya's threat hung over her like a storm cloud, but it was the memory of Zane's stricken face that followed her home. Tomorrow, everyone would know. Tomorrow, she'd be the other woman, the homewrecker, the girl who'd come back to destroy what others had built. But tonight, she still had the memory of his kiss, and she held onto it like a lifeline as her world prepared to fall apart all over again. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Alia was leaving her morning literature class when she found Sophia waiting by the building's entrance. Her usually perfect composure cracked around the edges. "We need to talk," Sophia said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Alia's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral. "About what?" "Don't play dumb. Maya told me about yesterday. About you and Zane in the library." Sophia's blue eyes were bright with unshed tears, and despite everything, Alia felt a stab of guilt. "Sophia, How long?" Sophia interrupted. "How long have you been trying to steal my boyfriend?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. "I'm not trying to steal anyone," Alia said quietly. "What happened between Zane and me? It was complicated." "Complicated?" Sophia's voice rose, drawing stares from passing students. "You kissed my boyfriend. My boyfriend who I've been with for 8 months. There's nothing complicated about that." 8 months. Longer than Alia had expected. Long enough for real feelings to develop. The guilt twisted deeper in her chest. "You're right," Alia said finally. "I'm sorry. It shouldn't have happened." But Sophia wasn't finished. "Do you know what the really pathetic part is? He told me about you. About how you two were friends growing up. How you disappeared after your dad's scandal. I actually felt sorry for you." The words stung, but it was the truth in them that hurt most. Alia had returned to town broken and desperate, clinging to memories of a boy who'd moved on with his life. "I felt sorry for you," Sophia continued. "And you've been planning this whole time to take him away from me. That's not true, isn't it?" Sophia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You requested this school specifically, didn't you? You could have finished your degree anywhere. But you came back here. For him." The accuracy of the observation left Alia speechless. She had chosen Riverside University partly because of Zane, because some foolish part of her had hoped they could pick up where they'd left off. But she'd never intended for this to happen, never wanted to hurt anyone. "I see I'm right," Sophia said, reading Alia's silence correctly. "Well, here's something you should know about your precious Zane. He came to me last night, confessed everything like the guilty little boy he is. And do you know what he said when I asked him to choose?" Alia's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain still. "He said it was a mistake, that you were nothing more than a childhood memory he got carried away with. He chose me, Alia. He chose the girl who was here, who supported him, who built a life with him while you were off playing princess in London." Each word was designed to cut, and they found their mark with surgical precision. But it was the ring of truth in them that made Alia want to curl up and disappear. Of course Zane had chosen Sophia. It's what she'd expected, what she'd prepared herself for. "I understand," Alia managed, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Do you?" "Because I'm not done." Sophia's smile was sharp as glass. "See, Maya had a brilliant idea. She thinks the whole campus should know what kind of person you really are. The girl who comes back to destroy other people's relationships, just like her father destroyed other people's lives." The mention of her father hit like a physical blow, and Alia actually took a step backward. "Don't," she whispered. "Oh, but I think I will." Maya's already started spreading the story how the criminal's daughter seduced poor, innocent Zane. How you used your tragic past to manipulate him into feeling sorry for you. It's quite compelling. Actually, the world seemed to tilt around Alia as she realized what was happening. History was repeating itself, the whispers, the stares, the way people would cross the street to avoid her family. She'd thought coming back to school would be her fresh start, but instead she'd walked straight into another scandal. "Please," she said quietly, "whatever you think of me, this will hurt Zane too." Something flickered in Sophia's eyes, uncertainty, maybe, or the realization that her revenge might have collateral damage. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Zane made his choice," she said coldly. "Now you have to live with the consequences of yours." As Sophia walked away, leaving Alia standing alone outside the literature building, students began to notice her presence. She saw the way they whispered to each other, the way their eyes followed her with newfound interest. Maya had been busy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zane. "We need to talk. Meet me at our spot after your last class." Their spot. The oak tree behind the library where they'd spent countless afternoons as children, sharing dreams and secrets, that he still thought of it as theirs gave her a tiny spark of hope, even as her world crumbled around her. But as she walked across campus, feeling the weight of stares and whispers, she wondered if it was already too late. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal, and some choices couldn't be undone. The question was whether what they'd shared was strong enough to survive the storm they'd created, or if she was about to lose Zane all over again this time, perhaps for good. The campus was eerily quiet at 11:30 p.m. as Alia made her way to the old oak tree. She'd spent the day avoiding everyone, classmates, professors, even her roommate, as Maya's poison spread through the student body like wildfire. The girl who'd kissed her best friend's boyfriend, the criminal's daughter who couldn't be trusted. The whispers followed her everywhere. Zane was already there when she arrived, sitting against the massive trunk with his head in his hands. He looked up as she approached, and even in the dim moonlight she could see the exhaustion etched across his features. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak. "I'm so fucking sorry, Alia. I never meant for any of this to happen." She settled beside him, maintaining careful distance between them, despite every instinct screaming at her to move closer. "How bad is it?" "Bad." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd come to know meant he was trying to hold himself together. "Sophia broke up with me this afternoon, made quite a scene in the student center. Half the campus was watching." "I'm sorry," she said quietly, and meant it, whatever her feelings for Zane. She'd never wanted to destroy his relationship so publicly. "Are you?" The question caught her off guard, with its intensity. "Because I keep thinking about that kiss, and I can't bring myself to regret it. Even with everything that's happened, I can't regret finally knowing what it felt like to kiss you." Her breath caught in her throat. "Zane, I lied to Sophia," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "When she asked me to choose, I told her you meant nothing to me. I told her it was just old nostalgia, a moment of weakness. But that was the lie, Alia. The truth is that I've been in love with you since we were 15 years old." The confession hit her like lightning, illuminating everything she'd been too afraid to hope for. "You have, God." "Yes, do you remember the night before you left for London? I came to your house, but you wouldn't see me. I stood outside your window for 2 hours, trying to work up the courage to tell you how I felt, to ask you to stay, or to wait for me, or something. But I was too much of a coward." The memory came flooding back. She'd seen him from her bedroom window, but had been too ashamed, too broken by her family's scandal to face him. She'd thought he was there out of pity. "I thought you were embarrassed by me," she admitted, "after everything that came out about my father. I thought you wouldn't want to be associated with our family." "Never." His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining with desperate certainty. "Never, Alia. What happened to your family was tragic, but it didn't change how I felt about you. If anything, I wanted to protect you from all of it." Tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. "I've loved you for so long," she whispered. "Even in London, even when I was trying to move on, it was always you." He turned to face her fully, his free hand cupping her cheek. "Then why are we fighting this? Why are we letting other people's opinions dictate our happiness?" "Because it's not just about us anymore," she said, leaning into his touch despite her words. "Maya's turned this into something ugly. People are saying terrible things about me, about you, about us, and your relationship with Sophia is over," he said firmly. "It's been over for months, if I'm being honest. We stayed together out of habit more than anything else." She knew it too, even if she didn't want to admit it. He shifted closer, and she could see the resolve settling in his features. "I'm tired of being afraid, Alia. I'm tired of letting other people decide what's right for me. I want to be with you. I want to try this thing between us and see where it leads. Consequences be damned. Even if it means dealing with the gossip, the stares, people calling me a homewrecker for the rest of our time here. Especially then." His thumb brushed away her tears. "Because you're not a homewrecker. You're the girl I should have fought for 3 years ago. You're the woman I want to build a future with now." The sincerity in his voice broke down the last of her defenses. When he leaned in to kiss her this time, there was no guilt, no hesitation, just the rightness of finally being exactly where they belonged. I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love your brilliant mind and your fierce heart and the way you challenge me to be better. I love that you came back, even though it was scary. I love that you're here. I love you too," she whispered back. "I always have." They sat together under the oak tree until the sun began to rise, talking about everything: their fears, their dreams, their plans for a future that suddenly seemed possible. As the campus began to wake up around them, Zane stood and offered her his hand. "Ready to face the world together?" he asked. She looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face, open, hopeful, completely certain. Maya's threats still loomed, and there would be difficult days ahead. But for the first time since returning to Riverside University, Alia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Together, she agreed, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. As they walked hand in hand across the campus where they'd both learned to love, Alia realized that sometimes the greatest courage isn't in running away from your problems, it's in standing still and fighting for what matters most. The question is, when faced with the choice between societal expectations and authentic love, between playing it safe and taking a leap of faith, which path would you choose? And more importantly, do you believe that love found in the aftermath of heartbreak, love that emerges from the ashes of other relationships and past mistakes, can ever truly be pure? Or is it forever tainted by the circumstances of its beginning?